We'll start with the invocation given by Commissioner Buddy Goddard, and Commissioner Turner will lead us in the pledge. Will you please stand?
You'll bow your heads. Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to be here. And unfortunately, sometimes we have tough decisions, Lord, that we have to make, and we know we cannot please everyone. We just ask that you give us the wisdom to make the right decisions and just be with us as we make those decisions. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I may have to put that jacket back on.
Thank you, Commissioner Goddard and Commissioner Turner. We're calling this meeting to discuss the closing of some railroad crossings in South Putnam. And so, Administrator Suggs. And I know the Sheriff's Department and EMS services have been discussing with CSX about the possibility of maybe some alterations to their schedule on the particular closing in Buffalo Bluff.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, we were working over the weekend to see if we could get some resolution to an issue that was brought to our attention late last week with the possibility of having to close down Buffalo Bluff, a section of Buffalo Bluff for several hours, if not a couple days. And so we've been trying to work through that issue. We're here this morning. We called a meeting this morning if for no other reason than to get this communication out this morning and to be prepared to move forward in any other avenue that we may see fit to this morning after the conversation. So that's why this meeting was called.
Okay, and I want to make it clear that I know that I've been in contact with Administrator Suggs, and that I know that he's been in touch with each commissioner, and since honoring the Sunshine Law, I felt it best, and with the discussions with Administrator Suggs, that we call a special meeting with the parties involved to be able to discuss this in the forum that's proper, and so that's why we're here today.
Yes, sir, and if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I believe it will be appropriate with the latest information that was crafted and the discussions that took place Saturday and then again throughout the day Sunday by the Sheriff's Office. If it would be appropriate at this time, Sheriff, if you would lead the discussion.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is kind of go through some of the historical information that's led us to this, not specifically relating to these crossings, but some of the other issues that we've had in the past. The reality of it is that CSX as a corporation has not always been a good neighbor, and I won't go through the entire litany of problems that we've had with them in the past other than just a brief overview. Years ago, about 2 years ago, we were having a problem out at Crystal Cove that was similar in nature but yet different because it didn't involve construction. And the issue was CSX was blocking the entrance to Crystal Cove, the barge port, and all of the residences around there. This was an ongoing issue and had been for several years prior. We had tried to work to come up with some sort of a peaceful resolution and work the problem out amicably, but unfortunately it ultimately led into me climbing onto a train engine one day and threatening the engineer with arrest because for about the fourth time, one of the residents there, among others, was trying to make it to a chemotherapy appointment with her elderly mother. And unfortunately, it actually took me threatening an arrest in order for them to break the train and allow safe passage. That event ultimately led to them moving whatever maintenance function they were performing on those trains up to a yard in Jacksonville that was larger and could accommodate trains of that length. Again, that just gives you some historical data. More recently, and immediately post-Hurricane Dorian, we ran into yet a similar but different situation with relating to the operation of the railroad trestle at Buffalo Bluff. CSX had essentially abandoned that crossing And for those of you who are not aware, they actually monitor that crossing and operate it remotely now from a bridge up in Jacksonville. Our issue was we were trying to do floodwater and storm damage assessments from the river, and were not able to cross under the bridge at Buffalo Bluff, despite several attempts to reach their bridge tenders. Apparently, the Buffalo Bluff Bridge is actually controlled from a bridge up in Jacksonville now, and there's no redundancy, which is, in my opinion, negligent on the part of CSX, because it doesn't allow for operation of that particular bridge other than by remote access from a bridge that they were unable to access during the storm, rather than having some redundancy built into one of their backup communication centers. Particularly as it relates to this issue, as you're aware, this came to our attention on August 26th, and in my opinion, the public notice that was put out by the subcontractor that was hired for CSX was inadequate, in that it, not only in that it came during the peak of the storm and the hours surrounding the storm, but also I think that the public notice that was provided by the subcontractor was vague and didn't provide an adequate explanation as to their scope of work, and let us know that these crossings could potentially be closed for several hours. Alex Sharp, our general counsel, in the absence of Mr. DeNovo, who had some personal business he was taking care of, undertook this issue to try and get it resolved to the best of his ability, and I think we're there now. Whenever we had originally spoke about this, when Mr. Suggs and I talked, I think the plan was for the crossing to be closed up to 48 to 72 hours, depending on the length of time it took them to complete the work. Through Mr. Sharp's efforts in working with CSX's general counsel, he's actually been able to negotiate verbal agreement that in those areas affected, they have agreed not to start the work until 8 p.m. at night, conclude at 4 a.m. in the morning, and maintain a backhoe on site with some fill material that they're able to fill in the work site in the event that an emergency vehicle or a resident who has an emergency needs to cross those tracks. I think that's, that's something that we can certainly tolerate and live with, at least from my end, but that's just kind of the Reader's Digest version of what's led us here from about 40,000 feet over the last 48 to 72 hours.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sheriff Deloach. Any comments or questions? Okay. Are we going to take a phone call from?
I believe we, Mr. Senator, do we have the representative from CSX on the line? Okay. Yes, sir, we do have technology going this morning, and we do have
Mr. Spivey, are you still there? Mr. Spivey?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing there.
Okay.
pretty high tech when you stick a microphone in front of the phone.
If there was a question, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
No, I believe Sheriff Deloach has given us an update. Can you just confirm what, I guess, Mr. Sharp and maybe you agreed on what's going to happen with that particular crossing during the repair as far as the closure times?
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying there, so it's still muffled up. Yeah, so Buffalo Bluff Road there, we got some maintenance to do there, and I know there was some miscommunication there somehow through the local end of my department on closures, speaking 48 hours and things of that nature. We're not going to close the road for 48 hours at any point. But my proposal is this, to get the maintenance done and help the community and try to do the best for each of us, is a 2000 road closure and an 0400 opening. That would take place tonight. And then we do the same thing tomorrow night. Along with that, we would have backfill, some machines and some operators there. If there were to be an emergency and we need to clear the machines up, get people out of the way, fill the crossing, sometimes 15, 20 minutes maybe, to get emergency vehicles across if there would be a need for it.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Okay. Okay. Mr. Deloach?
Mr. Spivey, this is Gator Deloach. I'm the sheriff here in Putnam County. What I'd like additionally from you is your word that not only this crossing that's affected at Buffalo Bluff, but there are other crossings where there is one point of ingress and egress. And what I'd like from you is your word that you're willing to commit to having that backfill and equipment on site in the event that emergency vehicles need to pass through at those crossings as well, for those that don't have an alternate entry and exit point.
I'm having a real hard time here.
Mr. Spivey, good morning. This is Terry Suggs, County Administrator.
Good morning.
Good morning. The comment was, we appreciate the assistance that you're giving on Buffalo Bluff, but we would like some type of assurance from your office and your staff that any other crossing where there's only one point of ingress egress, that we would have the same setup, whether we have a backhoe, rock, whatever, for Buffalo Bluff, at those crossings as well, so we do not run into this issue further down the line as maintenance is being conducted throughout Putnam County.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so very much for that.
Mr. Suggs, can you ask him on the notification of the closure dates, how soon they will put up signs? Because I know that the county has, put out on social media and other ways to alert the public that they'll be closed, but will they put signs up, and when, how long will they put them out before the work will start?
Mr. Spivey, this is Terry Suggs again, County Administrator. The chairman is asking for a timeline of the other crossings within Putnam County that we're going to be doing maintenance on. What is your timeline for getting notification, signage out for residents to be able to prepare and be ready for this temporary shutdown in their neighborhoods and on their roads?
We try to do everything in 2-week increments. This is a moving target. Sometimes, we could be spot on with the time. We could be a day or two off. That's the issue. We try to give 2-week notice and then give spot on time as we get closer. As these machines move, there are sometimes we process, this is going to be a moving target here. So when we start tonight, might get 3 miles, we might get 5 miles. So we try to do as close as we can with as much notice as we can. But it will be daily updates to the community and to the residents there. But the initial should be 2 weeks.
That's again, thank you very much. I just want to point out for clarification, just so we're all on the same page here, the signage for Buffalo Bluff did not arrive until Friday afternoon or Friday morning. So that was a 3-day notice. So I know your folks are going to address that, and we appreciate it. And any assistance that you can give us on your end will just be another example of us working together for our residents, and I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Any other questions? I have none. Mr. Roll?
Yeah, I needed to ask
DeNovo?
Mr. Spivey a question, if I
Okay.
may. Mr. Spivey, can you hear me okay? This is Joe DeNovo, County Attorney.
Gotcha.
Okay. I just want some clarification on what your estimate is with regard to a situation where an emergency vehicle needed to cross that crossing and you have your backhoe available. From the moment that that vehicle arrives at that location and to the point where that is now passable for that emergency vehicle, how long do you think that would take?
Best guess, we could build, 1 lane of steel across there, probably a 15-minute process, 15, 20 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I know in the past, as doing Buffalo Bluff personally myself, previous role with the railroad, I've closed that. We had a deputy sheriff out there who was there to give us, if there was an emergency call or something, a heads up before the emergency vehicles were there if need be. Is there any way possible that could happen?
I'll defer to the sheriff on that.
Sheriff Deloach?
Mr. Spivey, this is Gator Deloach again. I don't necessarily have any aversion to that. That would be at an additional cost to CSX, as we would have to position an off-duty deputy sheriff down there. My recommendation would be to you as a cost savings to CSX and not placing an additional burden on the county sheriff's office resources would be to provide us with some contact information either for the contractor or a direct contact into your dispatch center, so that if we anticipated an emergency response down there, we would be able to notify those parties and begin the process of backfilling that crossing.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. Commissioner Rawls?
Are they working just on the rails and the ties, or are they taking up the asphalt as well? How big is their work area in width?
Did you hear that, Mr. Spivey?
I just heard, are they working?
Is it just the rails and the ties, or are you guys pulling up asphalt as well?
No, it'll be the asphalt. What we have is what we call a smoothing team coming through, and they will go through and lift every tie, clamps to the rail, lifts the ties. It'll be about 1.5 inch lift coming through. We'll be going through for 32 miles through there. So, yeah, the asphalt will come out.
Ties. He's pulling ties. Yeah. The ties are 8 by 8. But he's pulling everything. They're going to be about 12 inches deep. Is there any opportunity just to use steel plates? I've seen them do that on Highway 17, where they put steel plates in.
Is there an opportunity to just use steel plates to cover the roadway if needed?
We don't have those resources.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay. Commissioner Turner?
I think in trying to get along, we need to try this one, and then if it doesn't go the way we should go, and when the next one comes up, we need to make a different plan. They either need to put in a temporary crossing they could do it out of rock or whatever, or they could just do half at the time, or whatever the case. There's many different options. I think we should go ahead and let them try this one now that they've accommodated the 8 to 4. That shouldn't be nearly as bad for the residents that live there, and if there is an emergency, then we can hopefully get the contact information and give them the heads up where they'll have it filled in by the time our emergency gets there.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to say thank you for this board to be proactive on this, and thank you to our administrator. Sheriff, also, thank you for the public notice on YouTube. I would suggest, and I'm sure you probably are working on a new one that'll go on YouTube, on Facebook, so that was good. But that's where I got my information, so I appreciate it. And
Yes, our intention is to update that public service announcement to reflect these most recent changes to their scope of work in that area.
Good, thank you. And then we'll all share it and get it out. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I think, Quinn, do you want to make a comment? I want you to make a comment about where you are.
In looking at what they're closing tonight is Buffalo Bluff and County Road 309, both at the same time. If you know, the fire station's right on the other side of 309, so we're going to have to move some additional resources besides just at Buffalo Bluffs. I just want to point out that we're going to be moving some more equipment around to try to accommodate, making sure that we've got stuff on where we can respond when we need to.
Isn't there a small crossing in between 309 and Buffalo Bluff, right behind the closed-up Handyway? I think there's a crossing there, too. I was wondering if that was going to be,
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're working on that one or not, but our main crossing obviously is the 309 to get to Pomona and everything else. Otherwise, we've got to go all the way around.
Are they closing them simultaneously?
Yes, according to the list that we've got here.
The way I've seen these, they do this in the past, they come in, they have a machine that comes in and literally lifts everything, and sets, they're doing miles, they're saying 3 to 5 miles a day. Can we verify they're gonna be doing both at the same time? Because the way I've seen them doing, they have one long machine, it's like a train, it just goes along.
Right.
But it wouldn't stretch out that far.
They may have to fix the crossing after the machine goes through. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that's what they have to do. They come through and they raise it up and loosen it up, and then they have to fix
And
the
do the
asphalt of the
asphalt.
crossing up to the new height of the tracks. You know, that's an assumption that I'm making.
Can you ask him that question, Matt?
Mr. Spivey, is both the crossing at 308 and Buffalo Bluff going to be closed at the same time?
309.
309, I apologize.
309.
See? The 309, yeah.
No, it's straight, it's 309, and there's one in between.
309, top of the hill, Satsuma. No, sir.
One will be finished before the other is started?
Yes, sir.
Tell them the reason, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you mind?
Okay.
Matt, would you explain the reason to Mr. Spivey that our chief of the fire service said that he had a letter supporting that those two would happen?
Our fire chief came up and explained that according to the notice that both roadways were going to be closed. Was that just the notice that you were talking about earlier where we tried to notify that both would be closed?
That's correct. That's just the preliminary. They'll be updating them.
Okay, so that's in reference to what you were speaking about earlier, where it's just day-to-day based upon the work area that you'll be in.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Administrator Suggs?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think with some due diligence and some well-placed phone calls and patience, we actually have a resolution to a situation. I think it might be amenable to all of us as well as our residents. Just want to say a couple things before we get into the sheriff's final comments of whatever type of motions or support we may need here this morning. But I just want to say that this was a very fluid, very moving situation. Once notification got out on the 5th of September of this potential closure of these one point of ingress-egress roads, and it was a lot of effort went into this to get to where we are today, and I need to say thank you to both my commissioners for being available by phone yesterday, as well as the sheriff's office, and Alex Sharp, their attorney's willingness to jump on this to get the declaration taken care of that we needed here today in case that was the route that we needed to take. And again, an extension of what you saw at the EOC, and of collaboration and teamwork, and thank you guys for that, and thank the sheriff's office as well. Sheriff, you got any other motions or needs
Sheriff
here this
Deloach?
morning?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the only recommendation that I might make is, we have a gentleman's agreement, not even a handshake, that was made over the phone, that they'll comply with the terms as set forth and modify their scope of work. Just a recommendation, you might want to consider if one of the commissioners is willing to make a motion that if CSX does not hold up their end of the bargain, giving Mr. DeNovo and Mr. Sharp the authority collaboratively to proceed forward with the injunction for CSX to cease their work if they do not abide by these terms. And the unfortunate reality is the window of opportunity for doing that is narrowing as we get closer and closer to this anticipated start of their work on these crossings.
Okay, Sheriff Lowe, Commissioner Turner, you had a comment?
I guess I was gonna ask, since the agreement has been reached, what are we still doing here talking about it?
Your light's not on. Your light's not on, so there you
Okay, I'll repeat it. I said, I guess the question that I was gonna ask is, seeing as though an agreement's been reached, I understand it wasn't over the weekend, and I'd have done the same thing, called a meeting this morning to make sure that we have this taken care of. But I guess until Gator said something, I didn't even know why we were still here talking about it at all, because it looks like it's just became pretty much a non-issue. So, do we really wanna, I don't really care, but do we really wanna take it to the next level now that we've got this worked out?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that was the intent of the sheriff. I think the intent of the sheriff was, we do have a gentleman's agreement to properly move forward through the process of getting the maintenance on these rails taken care of. I think his concern, and I don't want to speak for the sheriff, I think the concern was, if they now do not honor their commitment to doing it this way, for us to move forward with any type of future, whether it be an injunction or whatever, we would have to reconvene this board to make that decision. And I think he's just looking for a motion here today that not to have to come back a second time with the commissioners, to go ahead and give direction that if they don't honor their commitment, that we have the authority to move forward through the court system if necessary.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I might continue, I think I'd like to give them the opportunity to be good for their word. We're gonna have a meeting tomorrow. If they don't do what they're supposed to do tonight, then we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll be here anyhow.
I concur.
That is true. I concur.
Okay. Mr. DeNovo?
Yes, if I could just address that issue. I think what the sheriff's getting at, and I'm in agreement with him, I guess probably to quote former President Reagan, trust but verify. I think that it's important, you have the authority under chapter or section 125.01 B to authorize taking any legal actions to protect the interests of the county. It doesn't mean you're going to necessarily take that action, okay? But it is, you keep it in reserve in the event that this gentleman's agreement becomes less gentlemanly. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily, I think for everybody concerned, we hope that this resolution addresses the situation. But should that not occur, the availability of that tool, if you will, in your toolbox, to be able to make sure that the crossing isn't blocked arbitrarily, or this agreement is not carried out as it's been explained to us, I think would be very, very prudent to just give the authorization. It doesn't mean any action may need to be taken, but it very well might be something that has to be taken timely. That's how injunctions usually work, to prevent imminent harm. And so that's really, you've got that authority under 125.01, and that's would be the purpose of the motion more than anything else.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Mr. Chairman, I concur with Commissioner Turner. You know, we were not going to know if their agreement's not good until tomorrow morning anyway. And then we have time, we'll be here at 9. It's no different than what we're here today. We could do an emergency item first thing in the morning if that need be. But I think that they've negotiated in good faith, and we should allow that to happen.
If I may,
Commissioner
Mr.
Turner.
Chairman, I'd also like to take that one step further. I think that before I authorized, and no offense to any of you guys, before I authorize our legal counsel to have that authority, I would rather authorize the chairman to have that authority to give to them if it's needed at a moment's notice. That would make me more comfortable than just turning it over to a third party.
Okay.
What's the chairman say?
Mr. Chairman?
I have no problem with letting them show their faith by doing that, but if you want to put it in place where I can make the call, that's fine with me.
Mr. Chairman, may I have some real legal, I'm not an attorney, but I've consulted with some people. I have some real issues over this, and I have not had time to get with Attorney Joe this morning on it. But an injunction could put us in some jeopardy. And I'm not so sure I'm willing to give that authority right now, based on some of the questions I have. I'd rather be good neighbors tonight, see what's going to take place, and we'll be here tomorrow morning.
That's fine with me. Commissioner Rawls?
I agree with Commissioner Turner and Harvey. We're going to be here tomorrow, number one. Number two, if we preclude them from doing work that creates a life safety issue for the public and something happens, I think we put that rope around our own necks. So I think we need to tread very, very, very slowly right now. Let them get their work done. CSX is a large corporation. I'm sure they deal with this quite often. And I would imagine they know how much work they can do inside of an 8-hour window. So it's going to be very hard for the citizens that live down there beyond the tracks, and there's a lot of them. We need to make sure we get the word out to them that from 8 p.m. until 4 a.m. they won't have access to that road. Otherwise, that's really the only inconvenience, if there is any. Hermit's Cove, I mean, there's a lot of retirees and older folks that live down there. All I can say is thank God we're not doing this in November or December when the places are more populous. But I think we should just be in a wait and watch situation right now and see how it goes tonight. And because an injunction is a really big deal, going to a judge and us stopping something as big as CSX. And not only that, going forward, how do we maintain a relationship? I think that's also important in the future. We'll be discussing some things tomorrow for the Port Authority workshop.
Okay, I'm good with that. We can, if we have to do something, we can do something tomorrow. Who's going to alert us if the work's not done the way it's supposed to?
Imagine 212 people live on the other side of the railroad track.
Okay. Okay, now, I do have a question. We're talking about these closings. Can you ask him when 309 is going to be closed? And if they're going to provide that same service, because if not, people are going to have to go all the way, they'll have to go to Pomona Park and go in on 308B to get to Highway 17. And Cisco Road, yeah, so it's they can get around, but it's going to be inconvenience. And is there a notification up at the crossings now that when they will be doing the work?
Mr. Spivey, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
In regards to 309, the closing at 309, are the same opportunities going to be put in place regarding equipment as well as notifications of when that will be closed? We understand that there is a way around that crossing. However, it's quite a distance and is quite an inconvenience to residents down there.
Yeah, I lived down there for 9 years. That's normally not our procedure, but there's a alternate route. I mean, I can't commit to that without talking to the local forces and knowing what's in place down there. But as far as the notification should have already been sent out, and I'll make sure it's followed up with daily.
Okay. All right, now, the change that we have now, how do we get that message out to the people in Buffalo Bluff?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Harvey?
We put signboard, Sheriff, do you have the signboards available to put down there at the Buffalo Bluff crossing today?
I'll check and see if we have any signboards available. The issue that I have with it is if we place signboards down there, we're effectively providing a service to a private business that we wouldn't ordinarily provide. I think that burden should fall on the back of CSX to provide that notification with regard to these crossings.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Turner?
Well, Sheriff, while I would normally totally agree with what you're saying, I think that trying to get CSX to find signboards and get them out by 8 o'clock tonight and notify the people is asking a little too much. So I'm just wondering, while I don't agree that we should do this on a regular basis by any means, if you had one available, maybe we could say that we're helping the residents that live on the other side of the tracks instead of that we're helping CSX.
Well, I agree with you, and these are certainly extenuating circumstances, so I wouldn't mind doing that at this one particular crossing, but I would ask that CSX provide that notification and those signs at those additional crossings where the work is to be done. And again, just to reiterate my statement previously with regard to the motion or the suggestion for the motion that I made, it wasn't to go ahead and file for the injunction, but merely to give the chairman the authority, if CSX did not hold up their end of the bargain, to authorize that. Because in my experience with them, as I explained to you previously, in my opinion, they have not been good neighbors with us and have been difficult, to say the least, to work with in the past.
I know we have to open up public comment, so I'm gonna open up the public comment portion. And I believe we have an individual that wishes to speak on this issue.
Okay.
Well, thank you, and I actually had every intention to shock Terry Turner and not speak.
It would've.
But, I know. There's an electronic sign there now. All you have to do is get them to put an accurate message. Unfortunately, it didn't go up until about Friday. Joe Pickens, 125 Woodbury Trail, Satsuma. So I live at the end of the dirt road at the end of Buffalo Bluff. So an electronic sign is there. It says that it's going to be closed at 4 o'clock today. That's it. Doesn't say anything else. So if Mr. Spivey could just get the sign, it would help at least if the message could say it's going to close at 8 o'clock and it'll reopen it at 4. And as Bill knows, Carol leaves the house at 4:30 every morning, so you'll know whether they've finished by 4:30 by the time you get here. So
4:33.
But a simple, and I can confirm that the sign's been changed when I go home after a chamber meeting if I can help in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spivey, did you hear those comments?
I think they want the sign updated, if I heard it correctly.
Correct. The question was, can the signboard that is out there be changed to be an accurate message of the
8
newest
p.m. to 4.
information that has been agreed upon today, closing at 8 p.m. and reopening at 4 a.m.?
Yeah, I'll get a hold of the sign company and try to get the best message on there we can.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, Commissioner Ross?
When was the last time this work was done, and how was it handled then?
Mr. Spivey, when was the last time that this work was done, and how was the closures handled back then?
Let's see. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but I believe that was about 3 or 4 years ago. We come through with a talking, it's probably a 5-year cycle, so it's probably 4 to 5 years actually. And we basically did the same thing we're doing now. We used a different company than we use now, but they go out, hand out flyers, talk to the municipalities, and handle it that way, then put a message board up the week before.
None of that was done. Mr. Spivey, this is the county administrator. We can appreciate that, and I think if we were to get back to that type of pre-notification of the work to be done for notifying our citizens, I think we would be in a much better position than what we are today. I don't believe any citizen received any prior notification, and the signboard that was going to be out there 2 weeks in advance got out there 2 days in advance, 3 days at the max. So I think that's an area of concern that I hope that your office can help us with these future closures that's going to be having maintenance done throughout all of Putnam County.
Yes, sir, and I'm looking into where the failure was here. I'm not really sure what happened here. I just learned of this yesterday, so I'm digging into it here.
We know you are, and we thank you for that.
Communication.
Yeah, just like a communication, all right, okay. All right, any other public comment? Okay, any other comments? Okay, so I think we're good here. Okay, I do want to thank everybody involved, Sheriff's Department, Gator Sheriff Deloach, and Colonel Joe Wells, and Mr. Sharp, thank you for your assistance. Mr. Smith, thank you for your assistance. And Administrator Suggs, I know he was in his office almost all day yesterday in communication with everybody and trying to get this situation resolved. So I appreciate the commissioners coming in, everybody at such a short notice, and I appreciate everybody working together. And Mr. Spivey, I appreciate your help with this issue, and hopefully the rest of the work will go really smooth. So is there any other business to come before this meeting? Yeah, Mr. Spivey, do you have any other comments before we close the meeting?
No, sir. Appreciate everybody's patience in trying to let me get this figured out from this step, and then we'll do our best here.
Okay, thank you. No further business. We stand adjourned.